What if the royal crown wasn't a symbol of power, but a curse passed down through blood and bone? When young Princess Charlotte puts on Princess Diana's tiara, Queen Camilla loses her mind. But what's awakened inside the palace is far more terrifying than jealousy. This isn't just a family feud. It's a haunting that goes back centuries. Dare to watch till the end. You won't believe what the crown really hides. It began with a whisper in the halls of Buckingham Palace, one of those sinister murmurs that danced just beneath the tapestries, curling around the ears of the servants like a chill draft. Something was off with Queen Camilla. It all started the morning Princess Charlotte was set to appear at a closed royal event. A discreet but prestigious gathering for the unveiling of the late Princess Diana's restored sapphire tiara. It had been locked away for decades, its brilliance dimmed by the ghost of its former owner, spoken of only in reverent tones behind closed doors. But now, for reasons known only to the higher echelons of the royal family, it was to be worn again by Charlotte. When the news was announced at the royal breakfast, a hush fell over the room. Queen Camilla, holding a fragile porcelain cup of Earl Grey, froze mid-sip. Her fingers trembled slightly, and then tightened like talons around the delicate china. Her eyes, those ice-sharp eyes, locked on Charlotte, and something unspoken passed between them. The Queen rose slowly, her chair screeching back on the polished floor, and excused herself without another word. Behind palace doors, rumors began to brew like storm clouds. Camilla had been acting strangely for weeks, but this moment marked a tipping point. Staff reported her pacing through the long gallery at night, whispering to portraits, her heels echoing like warnings in the empty corridors. The most unnerving of all, she had taken to standing before the locked display cabinet where Diana's tiara rested, staring at it for hours in silence. Later that afternoon, as the preparations for the gala continued, Lady Anne, one of the senior attendants, was dispatched to the Queen's private quarters. She knocked twice. No answer. Upon opening the door, she found the room dark, the curtains drawn, the bed untouched. The Queen was gone. Only a faint trail of broken glass and torn silk led toward the servants' passage at the back of the chamber. Downstairs, Princess Charlotte, in her ceremonial dress, was led into the dressing room. There it lay, the sapphire tiara, glinting like a cold eye under the velvet lights. The stylist approached reverently, lifting it with gloved hands. But just as they were about to place it on Charlotte's head, the power surged and cut out. Darkness, a beat of silence, and then a scream, not Charlotte's. The lights flickered back, revealing a chilling sight. The tiara was gone. In its place, a trail of fresh blood smeared across the marble floor, leading out the open door. A shadow slipped away at the end of the hallway, barefoot, disheveled, draped in what looked like royal ceremonial robes ripped from their clasps. Queen Camilla had taken the tiara, and she wasn't done yet. Would you like me to continue the next section? The palace was thrown into chaos. Security was mobilized immediately, but it was too late. Camilla had vanished into the maze of the estate, barefoot and wild-eyed, the stolen tiara clenched in her fist. By the time the CCTV systems rebooted, all they captured was a fleeting glimpse, a figure in red and gold robes slipping through the East Wing's servants' exit, her silver hair loose and whipping in the wind like a broken banner. Princess Charlotte, pale and silent, was ushered back to her private quarters. She hadn't spoken a word since the lights returned. When her mother, Princess Catherine, arrived moments later, she found Charlotte curled in a chair, staring blankly at her reflection in the mirror, at the place on her head where the tiara should have rested. Camilla's descent into madness hadn't come overnight, but no one wanted to admit how long the signs had been there. Palace archives, hidden diaries, even old housekeepers began to speak in hushed voices of how Camilla had always feared Diana's memory. It haunted her, how she would pause in the hallways Diana once walked, as if hearing footsteps behind her, how she forbade any mention of Diana's name in her presence, how she demanded the tiara be buried forever, locked away out of sight. But the crown had other plans. That night, as search teams combed the gardens and tunnels beneath the palace, one of the guards stumbled upon a secret passage long believed sealed. A heavy oak panel had been forced open, and the air inside was rank with mold and something else, something older. The guard descended alone, his flashlight barely piercing the darkness. As he turned a corner, the light fell upon Camilla. She was kneeling in the center of a small stone chamber, surrounded by crumbling walls and flickering candles, somehow already lit. The tiara sat before her, resting atop a shrine made of old photos, dried flowers, and bits of scorched lace. Her lips moved silently, murmuring to something no one else could see. When the guard called out, she didn't flinch. Then she began to laugh, low at first like a wheeze, then louder, hysterical. The laugh echoed off the stone and came back distorted, almost in two voices. The guard stepped forward, commanding her to stand. Camilla turned slowly, her eyes shining unnaturally in the beam of light. Her face was streaked with ash, her nails black with dirt, and the tiara, it had changed. No longer blue, its sapphires shimmered red, like rubies soaked in something sinister. "I told her," Camilla whispered. "She couldn't have it. Not her. Not her ghost. Not the girl." Then the candles extinguished all at once. The guard's screams were never heard above ground. The next morning, the queen was gone again. Only the tiara remained, left on the floor at the foot of Diana's old bedroom door, alongside a single silver tooth. The blood on the velvet had not yet dried, and something scratched into the door's surface in jagged, desperate marks. "She's not finished. Shall I continue with the next section?" By dawn, the palace was under full lockdown. Scotland Yard had been summoned, but even their presence felt theatrical, like actors arriving late to a play that had already begun. Royal aides were tight-lipped, eyes hollow from lack of sleep, and whispers turned to urgent murmurs behind every tapestry and curtain. The story the press received was predictably sanitized, a private family emergency. But inside the palace, everyone knew. Something ancient had been stirred. In a sealed chamber in the West Wing, Princess Catherine met with King Charles. He sat slumped in his chair, gaunt and silent, as if the weight of the crown had finally crushed him. Catherine laid the tiara before him on a linen cloth. Though it had been wiped clean, a faint iron scent still lingered around it. The sapphires had returned to their normal hue, but when viewed from the corner of one's eye, they pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. "Camilla's not in her right mind," Catherine said carefully. "But this is more than madness." Charles said nothing for a long while. Then his voice cracked like old wood. "She always said Diana watched her, from the mirrors, from the windows, that she could hear her at night. I thought it was just guilt." Catherine swallowed hard. "Charlotte needs protection. Whatever this is, it wants her." That evening, Charlotte's room was reinforced with new security measures. Triple locked doors, motion sensors, guards outside. But she had already changed. Her smile was gone. She refused to eat. At night, she spoke in her sleep, not in English, but in a voice far too old for a child. It spoke of the weeping bride and the mirror lady, and always ended with the same chilling phrase, "She's coming back through me." In a last desperate measure, the Archbishop of Canterbury was brought in. He examined the tiara, then refused to touch it again. "It's cursed," he said, eyes wide with terror. "Not in metaphor. This is a relic now, a beacon for whatever soul was denied peace." The final straw came 2 nights later. At exactly 3:07 a.m., every mirror in Buckingham Palace shattered simultaneously. From the smallest compact in a maid's purse to the towering antique looking glass in the grand ballroom. Gone, reduced to splinters. And in the fragments some saw Camilla's face. Others swore it was Diana. But all agreed on one thing. They were screaming. In the morning, Charlotte was missing. Her bed was neatly made. No signs of a struggle. No footprints. Just a smear of sapphire blue lipstick across her pillow and, beneath it, a note written in handwriting too elegant, too vintage, to belong to a child. "She wears it better than I ever did. I'm ready to continue the next section whenever you are." The royal family descended into full panic behind the stone walls of the palace, while the public, unaware of the true horror unfolding, speculated wildly over tabloids and whispered broadcasts. Official statements continued to mask the nightmare. Princess Charlotte is resting at an undisclosed location, but within the monarchy, the silence was suffocating, and the fear very real. Charlotte was gone. Not kidnapped, not fled. Gone. Her presence erased without a trace. No footprints, no sound, no surveillance footage. It was as though the very walls had opened and swallowed her. Catherine hadn't slept in days. Her eyes were sunken, her movements rigid with fear. She kept repeating a phrase to herself, over and over, like a mantra. "She wears it better. She wears it better." They found the tiara again the next evening, this time in the Queen's private garden, laid gently on a moss-covered stone bench. But it was different now. Thorns had grown around its base, threading up between the sapphires like veins. The metal was darker, warped, as if burned by unseen fire, and beneath it, someone or something had placed a small lock of golden-brown hair tied with a silk ribbon. Charlotte's. Catherine screamed when she saw it. But there was something more terrifying than the tiara. A small, weathered music box had been placed next to it, a relic from the 1980s, instantly recognized by anyone old enough to remember. It was Diana's. A lullaby played from within, but slowed down too slow, distorting the sweet tune into something sinister and broken. When the palace's new head of security tried to pick it up, he dropped it with a gasp. The inside lid had been scratched with the words, "Take my place. Finish what I began." That same night, a palace historian, one of the few remaining archivists who hadn't fled or resigned, brought forward an old journal hidden deep within the royal vault. It had belonged to Diana. Most of it had been redacted or defaced, but there were legible entries near the end. One in particular stood out. Asterisk, "She visits me at night, the first bride. She hates the crown. Says it burned her. Says it's not meant for any woman's head. I see her in mirrors. I tried to destroy the tiara, but it always returns. Always. I fear I've cursed us all." Asterisk, the first bride. Another mystery. Another layer peeled back to reveal something far darker than jealousy or madness. What had begun as a bitter rivalry between queens had awoken something older, deeper, something ancient that lived within the walls of the monarchy itself. A spirit, curse, a legacy of suffering. 2 nights passed with no sign of Charlotte. Then, on the 3rd night, Catherine awoke to a sound. A single note from the music box. She ran, barefoot, down the long marble corridors of the palace, following the sound as it repeated, drawing her like a siren's song. It led her to the Queen's chapel, long and used, dust covering its pews, the altar forgotten beneath cloth and cobweb. And there, standing in the middle of the cold stone floor, was Charlotte, or what looked like her. She wore the tiara, but her eyes were wrong. They were older, wiser, full of grief. And when she smiled, Catherine stumbled back in terror. Not because of the expression, but because it was so unmistakably familiar. It was Diana's smile. Charlotte, Diana, spoke in a voice that was neither child nor adult, living nor dead. "You took her from me," she said softly. "Now I take what's mine." The candles in the chapel lit themselves, one by one. The shadows along the walls began to stretch, writhing like things alive. The stained glass windows pulsed with light that didn't come from the moon. And Charlotte took a step forward. "Let the crown bleed. Let the ghosts feast. The first bride is coming." "Shall I continue with the next section?" Catherine couldn't move. Her bare feet stuck to the cold chapel floor, as though the ancient stones themselves had become part of the spell. Charlotte, or the thing wearing her skin, tilted her head with a twitch too sharp, too unnatural. The tiara sparkled cruelly in the candlelight, no longer a symbol of royalty, but of something twisted, something possessed. "The first bride," the girl repeated, her voice echoing, not once, but in layers. Beneath it came another voice, soft and trembling with age, as though countless brides before Diana had whispered through her. Catherine finally forced her feet to move, inching back toward the doors, her breath sharp and shallow. "Charlotte, baby, it's Mummy. I know you're in there. Let me help you. Please, take the tiara off." But Charlotte only smiled wider. Her pupils dilated, turning the blue of her eyes into a haunting void. The sapphire crown pulsed once like a heartbeat. "It's not me anymore," she said. "She's worn me now. She fits better than the rest. Better than Camilla. Better than Diana. Better than all of them. I am the crown now." Suddenly, every candle in the chapel roared high, the flames turning black. The stained glass cracked inward, sending tiny colored shards raining onto the pews. A shrieking wind swept in from nowhere, carrying with it voices, dozens, maybe hundreds, all women, all in agony. Laughter followed, screaming, pleading, and then the aisle bled. A dark red stream began trickling from the altar down the center of the chapel like a river of memory. And rising from it came something not meant to be seen. A woman in a wedding gown from centuries past. Her veil was torn and wet, her face half bone, half flesh. Cheeks collapsed, lips missing, eyes wide with blind rage. Rusted jewelry hung from her neck like a noose, and her blackened hands dragged behind her a train of cobwebs and teeth. The first bride. Charlotte stepped aside for her. Catherine collapsed to her knees, gasping, heart pounding like thunder in her chest. She tried to pray, to scream, but the bride raised one skeletal hand, and Catherine's voice was stolen from her throat. The ghost bride glided forward, slow, deliberate, and stopped just inches from the trembling princess. Her breath smelled of dirt and rot, yet her voice was sickeningly elegant. "You marry into the crown, but the crown marries into you." Then she turned her gaze on Charlotte, and what happened next would be denied by every living soul in the palace for years to come. The bride reached out and touched the tiara. There was a blinding white flash, and Charlotte levitated, arms spread, hair flying upward in a whirlwind of light. The tiara sank into her scalp as though melting into flesh, fusing to bone. Her scream pierced the stained glass a second time, this time from within. The sound wasn't just human, it was ancestral, a weeping chorus that stretched back centuries. And then, silence. When Catherine came to, she was alone in the chapel. No candles, no tiara, no child. Just a single photo had been placed in her lap. It was old, weathered, black and white, a wedding portrait from the 1800s. The bride in the photo looked like Diana, but in her arms she held a child. And the child had Charlotte's face. "Would you like me to continue?" The photograph trembled in Catherine's hands. Her vision blurred, though she hadn't been crying. Something behind her eyes felt altered, as though a thin veil had dropped between her and reality. The chapel around her was quiet now, oppressively so. No sign of the ritual, no blood, no shattered glass, just the suffocating scent of old roses and dust. But that photograph, it was real. The paper was brittle, the ink slightly faded, yet the image was unmistakable. Charlotte, cradled in the arms of a dead bride from over a century ago. And behind them stood a crowd of women dressed in various eras of bridal wear. Some looked regal, some looked impoverished, but all bore the same expression, hollow, lifeless, silently screaming through their smiles. That night, Catherine tried to leave Buckingham Palace. But her exit was blocked, not by guards but by the palace itself. Every hallway looped back on itself. Every staircase descended into the same corridor she'd just left. She ran, barefoot again, whispering her daughter's name like a prayer, but the palace answered with silence. Not even echoes, just absence. Hours passed. Or days. Time folded in on itself. She found herself wandering into rooms she didn't recognize. Stone-walled chambers that smelled of earth and incense, filled with relics that should have been in museums. Ancient mirrors covered in cloth. Silver combs with dried blood caught in their teeth. Wedding rings etched with symbols long lost to language. And in one corner, a velvet-lined box sat open. The tiara. It had returned, glinting in the low candlelight, as though it had never left. Catherine approached it cautiously, trembling, her instincts warring against her grief. She reached down, hesitating just before her fingers touched the cold metal. A whisper slid through the air. Wear it, or lose her forever. The voice was not Charlotte's, nor Diana's. It was the first bride. Catherine's hand hovered above the tiara. Her mind raced, memories of Charlotte's laughter, the sound of her feet running through the palace gardens, her soft voice saying, "Good night, Mummy." All of it now out of reach, trapped behind some veil of power and ancient, bridal rage. She placed the tiara on her head. The moment it touched her, the walls of the palace groaned. The very stones seemed to exhale. Catherine's body seized. Pain flooded her skull, like needles driving into her mind, threading memory with something other. She saw visions. Every queen, every princess, every noblewoman who had worn the crown. Their fates, their fears. The torment hidden behind polished smiles and coronation gowns. She saw Diana's last night. The fight, the regret, the crash. But deeper still, she saw what followed. The choice. The tiara had always been the price. A vessel, a gate, a beacon that called the first bride, again and again to claim a new host, a new lineage to possess. Catherine collapsed. When she awoke, she was in her own quarters. Clean, dressed. The sun was shining faintly through the windows. Everything was in place. Everything was normal, except her reflection. In the mirror, her face looked just slightly off. The smile didn't match her thoughts. The eyes too calm, too patient. And behind her, standing in the reflection but nowhere else, was Charlotte, wearing a veil, waiting. Would you like me to continue? The day of the royal gala arrived with a strangely forced calm. The monarchy, ever obsessed with appearances, moved ahead as if nothing had occurred. Invitations were sent, the palace polished to its finest shimmer, and Catherine, now visibly thinner, paler, stood at the top of the grand staircase with the poise of a porcelain doll. The tiara sat proudly on her head, sparkling unnaturally beneath the chandeliers, its sapphires catching light that wasn't there. But those who looked too long into its glint felt watched. The guests filed in. Ambassadors, dignitaries, aristocrats from across Europe. They smiled politely, oblivious to the churning horror just beneath the polished floors. But among the servants and lower ranks of staff, a rumor had begun to spread about the child, about the secret cries heard in the walls, about the small, bare footprints sometimes found leading nowhere. And that photograph. One maid swore she saw it tucked beneath Catherine's pillow the day before. A photo from another time, another life. As the gala unfolded, Catherine descended the staircase slowly. Each step echoed with unnatural weight. The music swelled, a haunting waltz played by a string quartet that didn't seem to blink. The ballroom's grandeur shimmered, but beneath it all, a static buzz lingered in the air, like the palace itself was holding its breath. Then, without warning, every light went out. Gasps erupted. The music stopped mid-note. Seconds passed. When the lights returned, Catherine stood alone in the center of the ballroom. Everyone else had frozen in place, as if time had stilled, or perhaps something far worse had wrapped its fingers around their minds. She looked around at them, slowly, as if trying to recognize each face. And then she spoke. She has chosen. The crown is hungry again. At that moment, all mirrors in the ballroom, hidden behind gilded panels and forgotten vanity tables, shattered simultaneously. The glass rained down in 1,000 shards, slicing air and silk and skin. But no one screamed. They couldn't. Their mouths wouldn't open. And from every broken piece, reflections stepped out. Women in wedding gowns from every century, every decade. Their faces twisted, half beautiful, half decayed. Some weeping, some smiling, all with their gaze fixed on Catherine. But one among them held a child's hand. Charlotte. She looked peaceful, serene, like royalty. Then she spoke for the first time in days. Now we're all queens. And every light died again, this time for much longer. Would you like me to write the final ending section? When the lights returned, the ballroom was empty. No guests, no guards, no musicians, no trace of the grand feast or glittering ceremony that had taken place just minutes, or perhaps hours, before. Only the eerie echo of distant footsteps and the scent of roses long dead. Buckingham Palace stood silent. Its great halls no longer buzzed with life but whispered with voices that didn't belong to the living. Servants who arrived the next morning to resume their duties found the gates ajar, the air unnaturally cold. Portraits on the walls had shifted. Some were missing. In one gilded frame where Queen Camilla's portrait had once hung, there was now a dark canvas, blank, except for a faint smudge resembling a veil. Catherine was found seated on the throne in the Queen's drawing room, completely still, wearing a white wedding gown no one remembered her owning. The tiara rested neatly on her head, glowing softly as if warmed by some inner flame. Her eyes were open, focused on nothing. Yet her lips curled into a satisfied smile. She did not blink. She did not speak. Charlotte was never found again in the physical sense. But her presence remained. Children who toured the palace months later claimed they saw the princess under the stairs, or the girl in the mirror, waving. Some even said she came to them in dreams asking to play, but always warning before disappearing. Don't wear the crown. It bites. Whispers began to surround the monarchy. The Queen no longer appeared in public. When she did, it was only through heavily edited photos or distant, silent footage. Her eyes were always too dark, her movements too smooth. Journalists who questioned too deeply often went missing, their last stories unpublished or censored. But the most unsettling report came from a staff member who fled the palace, never to return. He claimed that once, during a stormy night, he passed by the Queen's chamber and heard laughter, childlike, musical, followed by dozens of footsteps pacing the room, too many for one person. And behind the door, a chorus of voices whispered in unison, "We do." After that, the monarchy shifted. Royal duties were handled behind closed doors. Coronations were quietly postponed. Weddings were no longer televised. And the tiara was never seen again, or so they thought. Years later, on a foggy October morning, a photo surfaced online, grainy, taken at a train station in the English countryside. A woman in a long white gown, a girl by her side, both looking at the camera. And on the girl's head, the unmistakable glint of sapphire. The caption below simply read, "The crown never dies. It waits."